acting in a manner of financial literacy, I guess I would say. And then we'll kind of kick it from there. But to get started, I guess, I gave you a little bit of a background, right? There's emergency funds, there's budgets, there's investing, there's getting a home, there's getting cash flowing businesses, there's, buying jewelry, watches, there's art, there's hedges, there's leverage trading, there's all these different things, and all these are different rabbit holes that people can go down in their journey to becoming financially literate. But you have to start somewhere, right? Everybody starts somewhere. And so if you were at zero and you were just thinking, all right, I'm about to begin my journey to becoming financially literate, to becoming conscientious about how I earn and spend the monetary resources that enter my life, and really being intentional about setting yourself up for success in utilizing and creating hyper efficient scenarios with those resources. So to get started, I took a Money Matters class in high school a long time ago, and it was taught basically by Dave Ramsey. So a lot of my ideals really overlap with what he preaches, and what he's preached for a long time is really great information. And to kick it off, one thing he always talks about is you need an emergency fund. And I like to break this out to two things, similarly to how he does. So he says first is get mattress money, right? So this is go out and save up around like $500, maybe $1,000 in cash that you can keep on your person in your household, in maybe a fire safe box, a locked box, maybe under your mattress, but money that you in stuff hits the fan type scenario, you could grab and go with, and you have some liquidity on your person. You don't need to go to a bank. You don't need to deal with anybody. It's mattress money. It's the very, very emergency fund. Then it goes to your main emergency fund. And so when it comes to a main emergency fund, what a lot of people recommend is getting somewhere between 3 to 6 months of your expenses, your typical monthly expenses, set aside into a high income savings account, maybe into a checking account, something that's FDIC insured, which means that if the bank became insolvent, you're not going to lose your money. Some type of account like that that's really, really low risk, but not really high reward either, with that 3 to 6 months worth of your expenses that you could potentially be needing in the event that you got laid off or lost your job, or maybe another pandemic came through and the world shut down and you need access to funds because everybody loses their job, or a number of different things could happen where you would need to be able to rely on your own resources for a period of time of about 3 to 6 months. And one thing that I really like to talk to people about with this space is if you're going to try to do this exercise, don't look at what you think your expenses would be. Go actually look at your credit card bill and say, oh, I spent this amount of money over this month. I spent this amount of money on food this month. I spent this amount of money on heating this month. This month of money on electricity. This amount of money on traveling and miscellaneous, or whatever. Add that up and know what you're actually spending, and then make sure that you have that amount, 3 to 6 months worth of that spending, in an emergency fund, so that in those high risk scenarios where you lose your job, you can have time to be comfortable and know that you're safe with that emergency fund to keep living your life the way that you were already living it. And you don't have to do it all at once. It's not, if you have a bunch of money in crypto and you have no emergency fund, don't just like sell 6 months worth of your expenses and move all of that into an emergency fund. All these things are just ideas. They're not financial advice. It's not go out and do this right now. It's just think about this stuff. Think about what would you do in an emergency? Do you have access to pretty immediate liquidity? And so Dave Ramsey recommends this. I think it's a really cool idea. I like to institute this in my own planning for my financial future. So getting an emergency fund, really, really important thing to do. And how much you need in it, this is, it's, not a ton. It's not an insane amount of money that you need in it, 3 to 6 months worth of your expenses, but they say that it can change depending on everybody, which is also true. So just talk with the people who rely on you financially. Think about it. How much of an emergency fund would you need? What type of emergencies could you face that you would need access to that type of emergency fund? So that's the first thing that I would say in Financial Literacy 101. Coming up next, I would say building a budget. Nowadays people talk a lot about budget building and how important it is and blah, 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 blah. It's really is important to do, but it isn't as difficult as you necessarily think that they used to be. Nice, giving out my email address and the extra email address for anybody who wants to send me an email. They're really not as, you don't need to go out on an Excel sheet and make this highly complex document off of some template that an influencer made you. There are tons of apps out there that are really, really easy to use with plug-and-play solutions for building a budget. And yeah, there's, people will say a lot of times, don't go to Mint and then plug in your bank account because you're just giving all your data to Mint or you're giving all your data to these people. That might be true too, but you don't have to go in Excel. You can go in Mint and not connect all of your bank accounts, but use their pre-built platform to say, hey, these are what my expenses are. These are what my income is. You don't have to plug it in and give them access to seeing your income. You can just say, this is what my income is. And you can build really, really robust, easy to use, easy to follow budgets, and even give yourself notifications on those budgets to make sure that you're sticking within them. You can connect your bank accounts. It's not for everybody. Some people get nervous giving access to things like that. But I personally am not that afraid of giving access to my bank account to a company like this if I'm not doing anything that I would be nervous that they found in that bank account, So kind of take it or leave it how you will, but building a budget is really, really important. Think about it like a business. Your income is your revenue. Your expenses are, again, your expenses. But then your free cash flow, your net income at the end of the year, what is that? How do you amplify that? How do you increase that number so that you can invest that difference, so that you can start to accrue assets, so that you can grow your wealth over a long period of time? So that's building a budget. So the next thing I would say is getting out of debt. Getting out of debt is something that's really, really important that a lot of people think of as a very daunting, overarching, thing that they could never get out of eventually. And so Dave Ramsey has a couple of ideas that he recommends for getting out of debt really quickly. He has both the debt snowball and the debt avalanche. And so basically what this is you're going to get all of your debt and list it all out. So say you have a credit card loan, a student loan, maybe a personal line of credit, and an auto loan, right? You'll list them all out based off of their interest rate and amount of principal interest. And then you can filter them and look at what's the highest interest rate, what's the highest, principal balance. And you can think about which one am I paying the most for over time. And then you just set a strategy that you stick to. I personally love this concept of setting a strategy and sticking to it. They're both the opposite thing. One of them is focusing on the highest interest rate first. One of them is focusing on the smallest balance first. They're very different. But the idea here is that it just gives you something to stay accountable to. You say, I'm going to pay this loan off first, and then you start and you finish, and you do it. So having a strategy, having a plan is really what the important part is to help you get out of that debt. So the debt snowball, though, it's basically a snowball, right? So if you have a $5,000 loan, a $7,000 loan, and a $10,000 loan, pay them off in that order. Pay the $5,000 loan off first, regardless of interest rate, because you're going to feel good. You're now only having 2 loans total left that you have to pay off. And so you're motivated when you go to pay off your next loan. Then you're able to, pay more each month on the principal balance than you may have before because you're motivated and you're excited about paying it off. And then you can see the light at the end of the tunnel and you get rid of it. The debt avalanche, though, is kind of different. You're trying to optimize for actual capital efficiency for the interest rate. If you're paying 20% on some debt and 5% on some other debt, you're really screwing yourself over with that 20% interest debt, but not really hurting yourself that much with that 5% debt. So even if that 20% debt is only $5,000 and your 5% debt is $10,000, you'll still pay that, flip that around. Even if your 20% debt is your 10 grand and your 5% debt is 5 grand, you'll still pay that 10 grand off first because you really want to get rid of those high interest rate debts that you have. It does take a toll on your motivation because you don't see that success for a long time. You might see that smaller loan with a smaller interest rate stacking up instead of you could have just paid it off. It takes a long time to get that first one done, but when you're doing this, you're being very capitally efficient. You're getting rid of that high interest rate first. So those are a couple of recommendations from Dave Ramsey on how to get out of debt. Getting out of debt is smart. Something that people talk to me a lot about in grad school that has really stuck with me is, if you're chasing a 7 to 10% return in the stock market annually, right? But you have debt, maybe you have a student loan that's at 9% interest. Every time that you pay that off ahead of time or pay off more of the principal or pay down that principal balance, you're giving yourself an immediate 9% return on investment because you no longer owe that 9%. So you're beating the stock market just by paying off your debt that's over the amount that you would expect to make in the stock market. That doesn't necessarily hold true if you have debt in the 1 to 3 to 5% range, right? Because if you can get 7, 9, 10% out of the stock market in the year, then yeah, some low interest debt might not be the end of the world. But when you have that 9, 10, 15, 25% credit card debt, now you're at the point where paying that off right now is the best usage potentially of your money because you're getting that immediate return of the amount of interest rate that the debt was. So that's another really cool thing about paying off debt that I feel like I never really realized until a little bit later. So those are a couple of concepts in Financial Literacy 101. I guess the only other thing I would really love to dive into on Financial Literacy 101 is the building wealth phase. And I'm not sitting here saying, everybody go do the FIRE movement. I don't practice FIRE. I just think it's a cool concept and it's an easy way to explain saving and investing to people in a broad audience where it's easy to wrap their minds around. So FIRE is just financial independence, retire early. And the concept here is that, you want to save way more money than you're spending really, really early on in your life and invest all of it so that you can retire early. And they typically try to save 25 times their annual expenses. And at that point, their portfolios are large enough that if they drew down or took out of it somewhere between 3 and 4% every year, that their portfolios, if still invested in the market, getting 7 to 9% a year, would never run out. They would be able to retire at that point of having 25 times their income. So the people in the FIRE community get as creative as possible as they can about how to save money and how to visualize your expenses, visualize your income, and make sure that you're setting aside and investing enough of the money that you make early in life so that you can retire early. So building wealth, right? The FIRE movement, the way people in the FIRE community would particularly say the best way to build wealth, right, is to save, but save in the market, right? I save with BTC, Bitcoin. That's my money. The people in the FIRE community a lot of times will say, hey, go save in the market really, really hard, but like save 50, 70, 80% of your after-tax income and invest it into high yielding ETFs, things that are like the S&P 500, things that are like the total stock index, different things in that realm. And they do that for a number of years with all of their income, and they live off of practically nothing. Meal prepping on Sundays, living on ramen. I mean, really the water diet, the potato diet, finding as many ways to optimize their energy usage, not having air conditioning, not having heaters, living in climates where it's, easier to not have air conditioning or heaters. They do anything and everything possible to lower their expenses so that they can save money in the market. But building wealth, you can build wealth in a variety of manners. Investing, saving, you can save your way to wealth. You're just going to have a lot of income. You can invest your way to wealth by doing it consistently and over time, dollar cost averaging into a broad range of diverse financial assets. You can build wealth with crypto. You can build wealth in a ton of different ways. but building wealth is the next step, right? So Dave Ramsey would put it, if you did in a hierarchy, there'd be like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or whatever. So like 1 would be get that mattress money. 2, get your emergency fund. 3, make sure that you have a really robust budget that you're sticking to. And 4, get out of debt. And 5, start building that wealth through investing in assets. I can't tell you what assets to invest in. I can't tell you to invest in assets. I can't tell you what to do with your money. I'm not a financial advisor. This is just how I think about things. This is how I look at the market. This is how I've been trained and taught different ideas over time about general financial literacy, and how to think about your money, so that you're making sure that you put yourself, your family, and everybody that relies on you in a really safe place for the long term. So that's all that I have. I'm going to check the Telegram really quick and see if there's any questions. It doesn't look like there's any. It also doesn't look like there's any in the live chat. So I guess with that, we will go ahead and end it here. But I appreciate everybody stopping by today. It was a pleasure to chat with you all, and I'll see you next time for the next episode of Cativersity. Thanks. See ya. Oh, and make sure you like, subscribe, and